17 books. He is currently actually the president of Egypt Green Building Council and the director of the board of Eco Strategies for Sustainable Development. So he's definitely the authority on the topic. So without further delay, and since we have little time left until 2050, I'm inviting Dr. Salah to take the podium.
Thank you, Dr. Lotfi. Good afternoon, everybody. Before I start the presentation, I would like to mention, can we have the PowerPoint presentation on the screen? Before I start the presentation, this work will be presented today, inshallah. It's a joint work between AUC, where I'm a professor at AUC, and Egypt Green Building Council, where I'm the president of Egypt Green Building Council and co-founder of Egypt GBC. Egypt GBC, it's a non-for-profit organization under the umbrella of Ministry of Social Solidarity, and it representing Egypt in the World Green Building Council with other 70 GBCs all over the world. The title of today is The Road to Net Zero. I will try to go over the road to net zero, and the subtitle is Pathway to Climate Resilient Future. Now, the main expected outcome from today's presentation is to draft the framework of the roadmap and action plan to solve the problem of climate change. That is the main expected outcome out of this presentation. Now, the contents of today's presentation: first, I will discuss the objective, followed by introduction and some climate change initiatives. And then I will give you a history of net zero. Is net zero started last year during COP26, or it has a long-term history? Of course, it has a long-term history here at AUC and worldwide, and we'll talk about that. And then I will move into utilization of greenhouse gases. And please underline the word utilization, because this is my favorable work throughout my 35 years in pollution, because it's very important to utilize the pollution and produce some kind of a business plan. And then I will move into enhancing national economy through mitigations, because mitigations and utilization can solve the problem of climate change. And then at the end, I will give a conclusion and some recommendations. Now, the objective is to present the core concept of the link between green buildings and green technology with climate change. Why I selected these two? Because green building and green technology represent almost about 80% of the total greenhouse gases. Also, I will present the solution of climate change using the concept of net zero. And that's a very important initiative started in COP26. And also, I will present the strong link between solving climate change problem with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals initiated by United Nations in September 2015. Now, this slide here from from the World Green Building Council, of course, what they try to say here, the green building has a much higher contribution in the greenhouse gases compared with transportation sector and industrial sector. If you try to see from this slide here, the percentage of the contribution of building sector and industrial sector, almost about 75 to 80% worldwide. And that's why I will focus in this too, because transportation is something else, but because I'm limited with time, then I will focus mainly on the building sector and the green industry or the industrial sector. Now, just to do some kind of study, the International Energy Agency indicated that in the world's primary energy needs will grow by 55% by the year 2030. And this requires $22 trillion of investment, which is beyond the expected budget from any country. Then what can we do? To do some further analysis, they try to analyze the power consumption through the building sector, industrial sector, agriculture sector, and government and public utilities. And as you can see from this slide here, the total amount of power consumption in the building sector and industrial sector is almost about 80%. And that's why I'm focusing mainly in these two sectors. And therefore, the first initiative, it was late 80s, I think in 1988 or 1989. They said there is a need for a new building initiative to save our resources, such as water, energy, and materials, as well as reducing greenhouse gases. And this initiative called Green Buildings. Another initiative, also they said we're still in bad need of resources, which is water, energy, and materials, and also reduce the greenhouse gases. And this is a green technology or green industry. Then there's two initiatives, which I will try to focus on these two initiatives. In 1990, United Kingdom was first country worldwide initiated green building rating system by BREEAM. And right now, there is almost about 80 to 90 rating systems all over the world. The UK was the first one in 1990, and right now there is about 600,000 buildings green. 8 years later, United States Green Building Council, they started a rating system called LEED. Now there is 8 rating systems in United States. LEED, it is a famous rating system, not only in United States, but worldwide. And right now, there is 1.6 million buildings green using LEED. And there's about 39,000 shopping malls certified with LEED. And the most important part, there is 200,000 LEED professionals, which means in the green building can also provide job opportunities. In Egypt, we have 4 rating systems. We have LEED, EDGE, GBRS, and Tarsheed, where Tarsheed is mainly from the NGO, Egypt Green Building Council. Unfortunately, we never reach 100 buildings green. And that is alarming signal if you try to compare it with other countries. Now, in 2012, Egypt Green Building Council was initiated as non-for-profit organization, and they have a mission to develop a rating system suitable for Egyptian environment, for the building code in Egypt. And they started a Tarsheed rating system. Tarsheed rating system was started based on a certain criteria. It has to be simple, practical, easy to implement, innovative, and the most important criteria is cost effective, because cost effective is the key issue behind any business. And the Tarsheed rating system in Egypt, it's based on 3 categories: energy, water, and habitat. Habitat, it is all items other than energy and water. In 2015, Egypt Green Building Council issued the Tarsheed affordable buildings. It's very simple: to save minimum 20% energy, 20% water, and 20% materials. Of course, mainly for new buildings, And then in 2018, or as a matter of fact, 2015, we tried to think about developing a rating system based on net zero. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And also not only for new buildings, but also for existing buildings. And therefore, we initiated the Tarsheed communities. Tarsheed communities for existing and new communities, because the trend now in Egypt, it is compounds. And therefore, we try to do, Tarsheed communities. Of course, Tarsheed communities for new buildings, new communities and existing communities, based on not only saving 20%, but saving resources according to the level you will select. It is based on 4 levels. And also it has something called prerequisite, where prerequisite, it is a mandatory because it gives some kind of vision about the future. Now, within the Tarsheed community, there is a prerequisite called you have to have 1 building green. And to have this building green with any rating system, we decided to have also a rating system which is, matched with the net zero concept. And therefore, in 2019, we, issued Tarsheed schools. And then in 2020, we issued Tarsheed commercial for new and existing commercial buildings. And in 2020 also, we issued the Tarsheed residential for new and existing residential buildings. Now, the rating system, it's based on 4 levels. If you be able to achieve 40 points plus, you can get bronze. If you be able to select 50 to 59, you get silver. If you can achieve 60 to 69, you can get Tarsheed gold. If you can, reach 70 and above, you can get platinum. Of course, again, as I said before, it is divided into prerequisite and credits. But this level here, it's called advanced. It does not exist in the Tarsheed affordable buildings. Just a few months ago, we get a request from Ministry of Social Solidarity to have Tarsheed Haya Karima. Now, Tarsheed Haya Karima, it is based on 2 levels only, gold and silver and gold. Now, the total cost of Tarsheed Haya Karima for registration, certification, and implementation will range between £10,000 and £20,000, which is nothing. Which for rural communities in the area of 50 to 70 meters square. And therefore, this is a very simple, easy to implement, and very cost effective. Now, there is an opportunity. There is an excellent business opportunity, issued by the International Finance Corporation Blueprint, where they said there is a $24.7 trillion allocated for green buildings worldwide. And this is a very good business opportunity, not only for the developers, but also for the designers, for the contractors, and also for the industry, because industry, they always look for green products. And this is a very good opportunity to follow. Now, the second initiative is called Green Technology or Green Industry. Now, the goals of green technology or green industry is conservation of natural resources, such as water, energy, and materials. It also helps protecting the health and well-being. Keep in mind, health and well-being, it is sustainable development goal number 3. And therefore, the green building and green technology will contribute to improvement the health and well-being. And also job opportunities exactly the same as the green buildings, because it will provide a lot of job opportunities. And innovation, you have to have some kind of innovation to be able to, implement the conversion from classical industry or classical technology into green technology. And of course, the cleaner production, which is the technique to approach green technology. Now, one of the very important facts, in Egypt was one of the leading countries to go into green technology during Her Excellency Dr. Nadia Makrabet, when she was the Minister of Environment. But unfortunately, since 2011, this center of cleaner production still physically exists, but without any outcomes. Now, one thing which is very important is to revisit the cleaner production techniques and include the carbon footprint. It's very simple to calculate the carbon footprint and then develop a plan to reduce the carbon footprint. And that is what we, this is the techniques which I will not go through all these techniques, but this is an 8 techniques where it's already implemented worldwide, but, promoted by the NIDO. And therefore, this is a very important to include the carbon footprint into these 8 techniques as one of the umbrella for the cleaner production techniques. Now, the second item is the history of net zero. Is the net zero started just last year during the COP26, or it has some kind of history? To do that, there is a life cycle assessment. Life cycle assessment is always based on cradle to grave and the cradle to cradle. Now, what the cradle to grave means is to extract the raw materials, process it, produce the product, and at the end, you would dispose the waste. That is called open loop. And this is not sustainable, because at the end, you will lose waste, which is a resource. Now, cradle to cradle means closing the loop, which means instead of disposing the waste, you can recycle it either on-site or off-site. And this is a very important concept regarding sustainability because it will save the resources. Cradle to cradle, some people call it circular economy, others call it closing the loop, other people call it net zero waste. And that is the beginning of the word net zero waste, or some people call it zero waste. This started in 2001 worldwide. That is a circular economy, which is exactly the same as the cradle to cradle, exactly the same as, net zero waste. By the way, there is a small difference between the word zero waste and net zero waste. Net zero waste means the subtracting the hazard waste from the non-hazardous waste. But in general, we always talk about non-hazard waste because hazard waste has another channel of implementations and approaching. Now, this slide here, it is mainly from the World Green Building Council, where World Green Building Council says a green building using cradle to grave will contribute to 9 sustainable development goals out of 17. Also, they said in the benefits behind green building, it can reduce the energy up to 50%. It can reduce the CO2 emissions by 39%. And it can reduce the water consumption by 40%, and it can reduce the waste generated by 70%. That is, if you follow cradle to grave. If you follow cradle to cradle, then these benefits will increase. Of course, the carbon dioxide emission will be increased from 39% to something else. I did not calculate it yet, but also the water can be also reduced. And the solid waste will go not 70% down to 100%. I would like to quote one statement here from Michael Brongert. Who is Michael Brongert? Michael Brongert, he is the first and the only cradle to cradle professor worldwide. He is a German chemical engineer. He said, we are not using materials, we are borrowing materials. When you borrow materials, you have to return it back as it is exactly the same. Now, Michael Brongert, he co-authored a book with William McDonough. William, he is an American architect, and they authored this book here, which talks about the concept and the benefits behind cradle to cradle. Here at AUC, we authored 2 books. One, which is Sustainable Industrial Design and Waste Management. That's the main title. The subtitle is Cradle to Cradle for Sustainable Development, where this book talks about the concept, the benefits, and the action plan to convert all types of waste into high quality products. Also in 2019, I authored another book with some of my students, which is called Roadmap for Global Sustainability, Rise of Green Community. This book is divided into 3 main sections. The first part is the Roadmap for Global Sustainability with the Sustainability Management System. The second part, the methodology to convert any community into green community, whether the community is rural community, urban community, or industrial community. Within this green community, there is a part, or a huge part of waste, where how to convert this waste into a high value product. And therefore, the last 2 chapters mainly talks about the conversion of waste and approach net zero waste. And all these techniques are documented in these books, all of them done here at AUC since 2001. Now, before I will get into that, of course, William McDonough and Michael Brongert, they established cradle to cradle offices in the United States, in Europe, and there is one office here in Egypt, by the way, in University of Heliopolis, but mainly directed toward second products. Worldwide, there is 4 rating systems included cradle to cradle concept within the rating systems. The one which is LEED by US Green Building Council, another one which is BREEAM by UK Green Building Council, a third one by German Green Building Council, which is DGNB, and the Tarsheed, which is Egypt Green Building Council. That's the only 4 rating systems, including cradle to cradle within their building rating systems. In 2015, I authored with some of my students a book called Sustainability and Innovation. And the subtitle is The Next Global industrial revolution, where chapter 3 is mainly focused on net zero. And net zero is the next global industrial revolution. Now, what I mean by net zero here, I mean net zero green strategy, net zero energy strategy, net zero water strategy, net zero waste strategy, and either you can say net zero emissions, or you can say neutral carbon emissions. Both are exactly the same. Now, the first part of the book is mainly discuss why we are not implementing sustainability as it was planned in 1992, because of the lack of innovation. And in this book, we released almost 7 innovations with complete technical details and about 14 innovations with some brief details to prove the concept. If you don't have innovation or innovation strategy, then forget about sustainability. You will never be able to implement sustainability. And innovation in what? Innovation in the net zero. And therefore, chapter 3 talks about this net zero concept in general. Just to get some kind of idea, what we mean by net zero green strategy is to have unequal out. Means there is no emissions and there is no waste. And you'll see that in a few minutes. This, under the green strategy, each country should have a net zero green strategy. Under this net zero green strategy, you can have net zero water strategy, net zero energy strategy, net zero water strategy, and net zero emission strategy. Net zero waste strategy, it's exactly the same as Cradle to Cradle. Net zero waste strategy, it's exactly the same as Cradle to Cradle. Just to give you a quick idea, solid waste can be classified into, municipal solid waste, agricultural waste, industrial waste, etc. This is the classification of solid waste worldwide. But the only difference between country and another is the quantity. Now, the quantity of solid waste in Egypt ranges between 140 million tons to 200 million tons per year. Only 20% of that recycled. The most important part linked to the climate change is the organic part of the waste. Now, in Egypt, the organic part of the waste ranges between 100 million tons to 140 million tons. Why organic? Because organic, when you leave the organic waste, either dump it on the street or dump it in the dump sites, it will be fermented. And at the beginning, during the first couple of days, the fermentation will be aerobically until the oxygen will be depleted, and then the fermentation will switch into anaerobic fermentation process. Now, what do you mean by anaerobic fermentation process? That is the release of methane gas. Now, methane gas is equivalent to 21 times CO2 emissions for global warming. And therefore, think about 100 million tons without utilizations, just set on a dump site, will be anaerobically fermented and release methane gas, CH4. And methane gas, it is 21 times equivalent to CO2. That is huge. And therefore, we have to focus on this type of waste for the sake of climate change, of course, and other types of waste. Now, very simple to recycle organic waste. Very simple. We have almost 40 plants here in Egypt converting organic waste into organic filterizer, not compost. There is a big difference between compost and organic filterizer. Organic filterizer, which can replace the chemical filterizers without any differences. It's very simple technology. I use it in my farm, for example. Very profitable. But we have to have this kind of technology spread all over the country. Now, that is a model, one of the model of the net zero waste, which is the AC model for the municipal solid waste, which is a garbage, where here and in our labs, we be able to convert all types of waste into high quality product. Of course, we can talk about, all this kind of net zero for hours, but I try to be very brief and fast. Now, net zero water strategy, it's a very important strategy. And it has three main elements. The first element is use water saving devices. Water saving devices can reduce the water consumption by 20%. And it's not difficult at all and not expensive. And the second part, which is the most important part, is the gray water, utilization of gray water. Within our houses, there is a gray water from the shower and sink, and there is a black water from the toilets. Now, the amount of gray water is almost 50%, ranges between 40 to 50%. In China, they collect the gray water and they pump it to flush the tank in the toilet without treatment. This is just a small unit. They sell it, I think, almost about 5 years ago. I asked for the price. It was about $300. And it's just installed in the bathrooms. In United Arab Emirates, they do one further step. They take the gray water and through centralized facilities at the basement, they treat it. And treatment of gray water is very simple. And then they use it to flush the tank of the toilets. Of course, we have a lot of work here at AUC in the gray water area to develop, even until today, with cooperation with Dr. Ahmed and some master students and PhD students to develop a technology, first, simple technology, efficient, and cheap. One thing which is very important for the gray water, if you save the gray water to be utilized and the water saving devices, this together will save 70% of the water consumption. Keep in mind, and if there is no any utilization, then this amount of wastewater will go into the sewer system. And therefore, when you try to utilize it, then you reduce the amount of wastewater going into the sewer system, and this is win for the government in general. There's a net zero energy strategy. There is a lot of buildings worldwide. There is a lot of buildings worldwide called net zero buildings. Even there is communities, net zero energy communities. Like, for example, in UK, there is BedZ. BedZ, it is net zero energy community. Some people might say, and this is expensive, I will comment on that in a minute. But also we have one building in United Arab Emirates by Magid Al Futain. It is net positive energy building where they generate energy more than what they need to run the building. And therefore they have extra energy, they sell it to the municipality. The problem with the energy, it is the way to generate energy out of solar energy. Of course, the common type is PV. The common type is PV. PV is still expensive. With the return of the photovoltaic cells, it's almost about 7 years, and therefore people try to avoid that because this is not a good business opportunity. But there is one thing which is very important, started in 2013 and finished in 2015 in Germany. They use microalgae. They use microalgae windows to allow the light to get into the buildings. That's one. And second, microalgae is a biomass. And therefore, they collect this biomass, and then at the basement, they produce a biofuel out of it. Macroalgae, it is the future. Macroalgae is the future. Why it is the future? Because it can be used as a human food. If you go to any drugstore, you can buy tablets of macroalgae as supplementary foods. Here in Egypt, we have a number of I don't like to say in a commercial, but it's a pilot project in terms of 1 acre or 2 acre ponds where they grow macroalgae. Macroalgae here in Egypt, we have one natural lake along the Cairo Alexandria Desert Road. It's called Green Lake, and in NRC they take the responsibility of this lake and they try to harvest the macroalgae from this lake. It's spirulina, and they produce almost 10 to 12 products, and they sell it in NRC in Turkey area. Another point, in just recently in Kafr al-Sheikh, they grow microalgae to feed the fish, because it's an excellent source of protein for the fish. Macroalgae, there is too many types. There is types of macroalgae rich in protein, types of macroalgae rich in carbohydrates, and types of macroalgae rich in oil. And therefore, depends on what kind of application you are looking for. And therefore, it is the future, and therefore they call it green gold. By the way, all oil and gas companies, they spend billions of dollars in macroalgae. And they have some kind of new strains with 70% oil, especially in British Petroleum and Shell, and they try to keep it for what they call it beyond petroleum. Even the technology itself of extracting the oil from the macroalgae, they have this kind of technology still until today classified, but it is the future. That's why the people call it green gold. One thing which is very important for the macroalgae, it's an excellent media for treating the waste. Here at AOC, just before COVID-19, we have one student, he converted the industrial waste, treated the industrial waste through a macroalgae using Chlorella vulgaris with the cooperation of Dr. Ahmed. I also, almost about 30 years ago, I visited one of the ponds in Suez to treat the sewage using macroalgae 30 years ago, to treat the sewage in Suez Governorate, to treat the sewage through the macroalgae. And then in the first pond, they have two systems in Suez. They have what they call it American system, which is concrete ponds, and a French system, which is earthing ponds. Now they take the sewage in the first pond and leave it for natural sedimentation. And then on the second pond, they grow macroalgae, which is spirulina, and then they put fish on that pond. I took sample of the fish and sample of water to check the toxicity on that time in Cairo University, and both were 100% free of toxicity. And we have very nice work, but very limited. In Lake Chad, the people in Chad, they harvest spirulina and eat it as a main dish. And therefore, in California, there is hundreds of macroalgae farms. Macroalgae is a very promising future for not only biofuel, but also for animal feed, fish and poultry feed, human food, etc. This diagram here is by Yusuf Chesti. He developed a very nice diagram based on his research. This was 2007. He tried to say if United States decided to switch from the fossil fuel into a biofuel, the first column gave you the corn type, and the second column gave you the yield per hectare. Hectare is about 3 something of then. And the third year is the required land to cover 50% of the fuel demand. If you try to check one, of course, there is a lot here, but I would like just to comment on the palm oil. Of course, in the United States, they use corn oil as an additive to synthetic fuel, because there is an advantage behind adding the biofuel to the synthetic fuel. It will enhance the combustion efficiency and reduce the emissions. And that's why Europe, they add 5 to 10% biofuel into their synthetic fuel. In the United States, they use corn oil, mix it with the synthetic fuel, and very simple to mix it. It does not require any technology. Even in Brazil, they use biofuel from sugarcane. In Malaysia, they have, which is a very important point here, palm oil. Palm oil, Malaysia started from zero, from scratch, during Mahathir Mohamad. And he decided to have palm oil to cover the national requirements. And then after he satisfied the requirements from the country, then he started exporting palm oil, and they are #1, exporting palm oil. Now, the most important part, after they export the palm oil and they cover the national requirement of the palm oil, now they convert it into biofuel. Of course, there is some question mark about the conversion to biofuel from the sustainability point of view, because they try to remove the forest trees and replace it by palm oil trees, etc. But that's another story. But they now have biofuel out of palm oil. And now, if you try to see the macroalgae, even with the current strain available in the market, which is 30% oil, the yield is almost 10 times the palm oil. It's almost 10 times the palm oil. Of course, if it's 70% oil, then the yield is much higher. Now I will move into utilization of greenhouse gas. Can we utilize the greenhouse gases? That is a very important question here. This diagram here is a very, very important. If you have a power plant, assume the power plant will burn a natural gas. Of course, natural gas is sulfur-free. But assume the power plant will burn coal or liquid fuel, where there is some sulfur. Sulfur is toxic for the macroalgae, and therefore you have to remove the sulfur 100%. Then if you try to assume the worst scenario condition, say you are burning a liquid fuel, the exhaust gases has sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, and carbon dioxide. Now, through something called desulfurization process, to remove the sulfur, what they did, and this technology, by the way, it is proven technology in Kallenberg, 75 miles from Copenhagen, started in 1969, by the way. They add lime to react with sulfur and produce gypsum. And by this way, you removed the sulfur. Why they did that? Because the price of coal is always related to the sulfur content. Higher the sulfur content, lower the price. And they want to get coal with very low price, but they can utilize the sulfur by injecting lime, which is limestone, limestone, and react with sulfur to produce gypsum. The first company started this process here. It is Jebroek. Jebroek started their business in Kallenberg by converting the gypsum into gypsum boards. Now Jebroek, it is a multinational company. We have branches here in Egypt, and they cover gypsum boards, 50% of the gypsum boards required in Europe. Now you guarantee there is no sulfur. Then you can take the carbon dioxide and inject it into the macroalgae pond with the solar energy. This will give you the photosynthesis process and enhance or increase the growth rate of the macroalgae. Not only that, but also the nitrogen oxides. It's considered as a nutrient for the macroalgae. Then you have already nutrients injected into the macroalgae. Now, once you have this kind of macroalgae pond, then you can extract the macroalgae, use it for any applications, and you can take it and extract oil out of the macroalgae and then produce a biofuel. Now, the waste of the macroalgae can go into the anaerobic digester to produce biogas. Now you have a biogas and biofuel, which can be now returned back to the power plant to run the plant. I read an article about 10 years ago about self-sustained power plant and they give some kind of required quantities. And in this article, there is one very important statement, as far as I remember. They consider the fossil fuel as a supplementary fuel, as an auxiliary fuel. But the biofuel is the main fuel. And that's what the people try to do. There is thousands of research in this diagram here. But unfortunately, all the work, it is in a research scale. We don't have any pilot scale until today. That's what we hope to have, a pilot scale of converting this kind of greenhouse gases into a high value products. Now we move into the net zero carbon emission. Net zero carbon emission, you can easily, produce a net zero carbon emission. That's one. Two, you can also, absorb what is already available in the atmosphere as a carbon dioxide. Now, this is a 10 rating systems worldwide, which they incorporate the net zero concept within the rating systems. And Egypt GBC or Tarsheed rating system is one of them. And I like one statement mentioned by His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Mohyiddin. He say race to zero. That is the actual race. We have to move all together to approach zero. Whether it's a zero waste, zero water, zero energy, it's very important to race for zero. Now I will move into enhancing national economy through mitigations. Now, to enhance the national economy through mitigations, there is 3 items very important, and at the end, it has to be integrated for economical purposes. The first one is mangroves trees. Mangroves, it's available in Egypt with thousands along the coast of the Red Sea. We start working with the mangroves before COVID-19, and in one of the research where the student, they took the stems of the mangroves and they converted into engineering wood. There's two types of mangroves. There is gray mangroves and red mangroves, and they were able to take the stems and convert it into engineering wood with very high quality. Of course, it requires some kind of fine tuning by more grinding, but we stopped because of the COVID-19, because we were planning to take the leaves and convert it into animal fodder. The most important part, why it is protected in Egypt, why mangroves is protected in Egypt, because it is considered as a national incubator for fish. It is considered as a national incubator because the fish will go into underneath this mangrove trees and they lay their eggs. And therefore, it's an excellent source to grow fish. That's one. The most important part is absorbing CO2 emissions and does not require any high quality water. Now, mangroves, it's raised in salt water, in seawater, with 30 to 35,000 ppm. Microalgae, there is types of microalgae which can grow in the marine, in the high salt content, like spirulina, and also other types of microalgae can grow in brackish water. Does not require high quality water. It can grow in any water with any salinity. All you have to do is to select the right strain. And therefore, instead of leaving the mangroves without any enhancement for the nutrients for fish, you can just grow spirulina within this mangrove forestry. And in this case, you will enhance the production of fish and produce enough filterizer for the mangrove plants. This is a picture of one of the mangrove forestry, which I recommended to have it along the Red Sea desert area with thousands of dens, and does not require fresh water. It requires just seawater. And this is another plant for the microalgae, where you can just use this microalgae and feed the fish with underneath the mangroves. And the most important part is Sericonia. What is Sericonia? Sericonia, it is another seawater plant. Sericonia is another seawater plant. In all over the world, they grow Sericonia in greenhouses. Why? Because of the weather. Sericonia is an excellent in Africa and in Egypt. It requires some kind of moderate temperature. And therefore Sericonia, it is a good source of food for humans, and it has very high oil contents. Now, before Russian-Ukraine conflicts, the 1 ton of Sericonia oil, they sell it for $500, slightly less than corn oil, and therefore we have an excellent source of oil to use, not only in greenhouses as like this here, but also in the desert area. Does not require any high quality soil. And therefore, with the desert area, with the salt water, you can grow Sericonia. And we have some, by the way, we have some along the Red Sea coast. In conclusion, for climate change, green building, it's a key issue, and each country should have their own national rating system like Tarsheed in Egypt. Green technology, it's a most important conversion of the current industry and technology into green technology. And Egypt was one of the leading countries during Her Excellency Dr. Nadia Makrabawait, when she was the Minister of Environment. But unfortunately, because of 2011, this kind of center stopped, because it is established by UNIDO all over the world. Cradle to cradle and net zero concept is a key issue behind solving the climate change, and this will lead into net zero carbon, and of course enhancing the national economy through mitigation. Then keep in mind, through mitigations and utilization, you can solve the problem of greenhouses. One thing which is very important, through mitigation and utilization, you can enhance the implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And also you can keep the 1.5 degrees C or even less, as mentioned in Paris Agreement in 2015. Some recommendations. The first recommendation is collaboration of all stakeholders, government, civil societies, private sector, international organization, and the most important is the people. We cannot leave the people without proper awareness to ask them to save the planet. One thing which is very important to tell in this statement, in this slide here, which is the last statement, it is recommended to include something new, net zero cost. Net zero cost, it is a new program I started almost about 2 weeks ago. And what do you mean by net zero cost is a capital cost minus the return. And this will guarantee any pollution can be converted into business plan. Last word, net zero concept is the solution to all pollution problems, including climate change. Utilization and mitigation of climate change will accelerate the implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. One quote, utilization is the solution to pollution using net zero cost. Just take home, not take home exam, take home message. It's time to act. Develop the framework of the roadmap and action plan to solve the problem of climate change in your community or in your country. This is a very important message to everybody. Now, to move from COP26 to COP27, we move from net zero initiative declared in COP26 to net zero action plan declared or will be declared, I hope, in COP27. And then from COP27 to COP28, because both 27 and 28 will be in the MENA region, then we can move from action plan into implementation and assessment. I think that's a very important theme for COP27 and COP28. At the end, I would like to thank everybody at AUC, my students, my family, everybody who are always integrated part in all my research activities, and I would like to thank you for your attendance, and thank you all. Any questions? Any question from the online participants? Ahmed.
Yes, Hello?
Hello?
Hello, Doctor.
Please introduce yourself and the question.
Yeah, this is Rafi Raouf. I'm the director of the Applied Studies Department in SCE, and I'm one of Dr. Salah's students. I was honored the last semester to be one of your students here. My question was regarding the Cradle to Cradle. Is there any initiative within the ASC to have a Cradle to Cradle club or to host the certification for Cradle to Cradle? Can we work on this initiative? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. The Cradle to Cradle certificate, I always say it is expensive. And there is one office in University of Heliopolis where they are it's established by the German government, by Michael Brongort, and to issue the certificate for Cradle to Cradle for SECAM products. But I also say it is, instead of having a certificate, we can just have the concept itself integrated within our day-to-day life. And I think we have a lot of work during the last 20 years to convert any type of waste into a high quality product. And all these technologies are documented in my books. By the way, one thing which is very important to mention here, in all my books can be downloaded from Egypt Knowledge Bank. Egypt Knowledge Bank, where the government of Egypt established this data bank almost a few years ago. They, I think, pay about $65 million for that. It's an excellent source of publications, books, and articles. Then you can download any of these books from the Egypt Knowledge Bank. Thank you. Hagar Salama.
Hello, Dr. Salah. I'm Hagar Salama. I'm a student at ASC for the Master in Sustainable Development. And I want to thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. So my question is, we discussed how green buildings and concepts of net zero support the mitigation of climate change, mainly through like reduced CO2 and methane emissions. But I wanted to ask, how can green buildings also support, let's say, adaptation and resilience to climate change impacts? So let's say increased temperature extremes or heat. Do these buildings also have components that can help people better prepare for some of these impacts? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. I think regarding the mitigations, it's already mentioned in the green buildings, where when you reduce the energy, this will reduce the greenhouse gases. When you reduce the water, you will reduce the carbon footprints. When you reduce the waste, you will reduce the carbon footprint. And all of this reduction, as mentioned by the World Green Building Council, you can reduce the water by, I explained that you can use it by 70%. You can reduce the waste by 70 to 100%. You can reduce the energy by 50% without that much of expenses. And this will mitigate, or this will decrease the greenhouse gases. Now, adaptation, it is something else. Adaptation is not within the buildings. It is something related to agriculture, where you try to adapt some of our, because again, when you say climate change, it is not only global warming. It's a global warming and also cooling, and therefore you have to do some kind of adaptation for the in the agriculture sector, but that does not have any relation to the green buildings. Abdulaziz. Dr. Abdulaziz.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Salah, for this nice presentation. Actually, I'm looking at a map created during COP26, and they talk about net zero pledges of different countries, almost 130 countries, to meet net zero emission by different years, whether 2050, 2070, 2040, and so on. And as shown by the map, actually, most of Middle Eastern countries, but Saudi Arabia, have no promises when the net zero emission is going to be met. And as a matter of fact, in some countries, net zero emission is already met because they don't create lots of pollutions. Those countries are not industrial. Meanwhile, if we look at pollution and environmental pollution, it's mostly created by developed and industrial countries. At the same time, some industrial countries withdraw from some agreements, such as Kyoto Agreement in Japan in the 90s. For example, United States did not sign it. And Paris protocols that was a few years back wasn't signed by the United States. I don't know if you can elaborate in this issue, how countries or how industrial countries are committed to net zero emissions nowadays, especially if we talk about the war between Russia and Ukraine and the consequences of this war when it comes to fossil fuel consumption. Some countries actually already declared that they're going to go back to coal, not to oil and gas, because of unavailability. Definitely, this is a serious issue that has to be addressed by developed countries, not by developing first. And what's going to be after net zero emissions? What's next? Let's say after 2070. What they're going to pay attention to. And this is a follow-up to the question by Hagar when she said the global warming, because we know that our universe always conserves energy. If we lose it somewhere, it should go somewhere else. What will happen to the oceans? What will happen to the flooding? And so on and so forth.
Okay, that's a very important question, and maybe it requires another presentation in the future. But to be brief, in COP26, all countries, 130 as far as I remember, signed
Yes.
is net zero initiative. And the net zero initiative declared in COP26 is to reduce the emission by 30% in 2030 and by 100% in 2050. Now, what I recommend for the industrial, I'm not saying industrial and developing countries, I don't like to say, I'm saying globally, we have to convert our industry and our technology to be green. And this will not only reduce the greenhouse gases, but it will save a huge amount of energy, water, and materials, as well as improving the air quality. Now, UNIDO, when they felt there is promising results out of the clean production or green technology, they established offices all over developing countries. In developed countries, there is a lot of offices working with clean production or green technologies. Now, I would love to not force, I'm not in favor of forcing, I would love to promote the concept of converting the classical industry into green industry. In Egypt, for example, started almost about 20 years ago by Ministry of Environment, and they established a cleaner production or green technology in all industrial sectors as a pilot project. But unfortunately, because of 2011, they stopped. Physically, they exist. There are some employees in the cleaner production center, but they are not operating at all until today. But this is something, it requires some reactivation. That is very important to encourage the people in the Middle East and in the world to convert their industry into green industry. Second point, which I mentioned that in one of the slides, in the United States, there is almost, if you try to consider the 8 rating systems, they have almost about 2 million building green. In UK, there is almost about 600,000 building green. But in Middle East, how many buildings in Middle East green? It's few hundreds. I think it is now time to promote the concept of green. To promote the concept of green, you have to have some kind of incentives from the government. Nobody, there is a rumor in the public media, they always say, oh, green building is very expensive. That is not correct. Even if you try to implement some of the international rating systems, green building will pay a lot during the operation cost. But the government should have some kind of incentives to encourage the people to move into green buildings. That's one. Two, then what is behind? What's after that? Assume we're able to solve the problem of climate change, which I'm sure it is very, very easy if we put all stakeholders all together and use the utilization and mitigation techniques for the solution. But assuming that we were able to solve the problem of climate change, then what's after is to go to what's called upcycling. Now, what's upcycling? That's, by the way, it is something which we did it here at AOC. We have a high and documented in all books. Upcycling means, and again, you can produce a product out of the waste with a higher value than the original raw material. You can produce a product out of the waste with a higher value than it cannot be produced from the original materials, but it has to be produced from the waste. For example, glass waste. Glass waste, it can be converted into foam glass. Foam glass, it's 1,000 times the price of the original raw materials. And it can be used for furnace insulation, etc. I hope I tried to answer you briefly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes. You have.
Hello. Thank you so much for the amazing presentation. It was a joy listening to you. My question is, in terms of the construction industry, net zero waste in the construction industry is very difficult to obtain. especially in Egypt, where the majority of the buildings aren't built for deconstruction. The buildings are usually. Oh, okay. Yeah, so the majority of the buildings aren't built for deconstruction. They're usually built just for the sake of being built, and they're usually with brick materials, which is very difficult to upcycle in the cradle to cradle. So what would be your suggestion in turning Egypt into like a zero waste in the construction industry? The second question would be, is Egypt's current state, does it allow for black water treatment? Does it allow for black water treatment? Because I'm not sure if the innovation has reached yet in order for Egypt to obtain black water treatment and for it to be safe for other uses.
I will start with the second question because that's easier. Black water, we have already this kind of black water treatment all over the country, or not all in the new cities. Like, for example, here in New Cairo, we have the wastewater treatment plant where they treat the black water and they produce water and use for landscape. All landscape in New Cairo, it's mainly irrigated by the treated water or wastewater. Now, regarding the first question, which is the most difficult question, until today, there is no plans to convert the construction and demolition waste. There is some trials. But in one of in the book, which is the roadmap for global sustainability, there is a chapter about the construction and demolition waste where you can convert this waste into products, high value products. The problem is people still reluctant to start the first pilot plant. I'm sure, I remember when I started working with the plastic recycling 30 years ago, nobody was interested in plastic recycling. And overnight, when they found the product, then I found hundreds of people start working with the plastic recycling. And I remember the price of the plastic waste on that time, this was almost about 30 years ago, moved from 100 pounds per ton into 600 pounds per ton. Of course, this was 30 years ago. And therefore, what we need is to have some kind of encouragement to start the first pilot plant. We have some trials, but unfortunately is not yet successful in Egypt.
Do you think that changing the main source of materials used in construction in Egypt would help?
Again, any material can be recycled. Any material can be recycled, even the bricks, whether it is, the concrete bricks or any type of bricks, it can be recycled. No problem with that. We have all this kind of technologies in our labs and also in our books. And therefore, it's very simple. One of the things which is very important when you select a material, you have to select a material for recyclability. This is part of the criteria behind sustainability, is to make sure and this material can be recycled. And that is something called extended producer responsibility in Europe. Now, the extended producer responsibility is the responsibility of the producer to make sure their products can be recycled. Otherwise, they should stop using these materials. But in brief, any material can be recycled. Yes.
I'm so happy with this question, Doctor, because I was about to ask construction and demolition aspect. I'm Sahar Al-Ghandour, Sustainability Manager here at the Office of Sustainability, but I'll be talking with another hat. I'm a participant in the Public Policy Hub, the round of this year, which has the theme of the climate change at the School of Gap. We are asked to tailor policy briefs to government, different government ministries with the most challenging topics, and it has the theme of climate change this year. My group has been dedicated to challenge and tackle the sustainable cities topic. And we selected the construction and demolition that happening excessively in Egypt, especially demolition, starting by demolition and then reconstructing back, not constructing from scratch. So we can see the cycle begins with the political will and how to figure out all these scientific based results and findings and deliver it in a policy brief to the government entities in order to initiate a policy or reform current policies in that direction, like in terms of taxes, in terms of like how to curb demolitions and how to put policies that say that it's not allowed openly, like what's happening now, without any ceiling. So it needs a political will based on these scientific findings. So this is not merely a question, but I wanted to thank you very much for this scientific, of course, based findings that we can use in order to trigger the policy will at a senior management of the country. And then do you agree that it starts, the cycle starts by a political will from the top down in order to make it effective on ground, not just to say people will? It needs a political will from the higher administration of the country. So I want to hear your opinion about that.
Okay, first, I'm not in favor of the policy going up to down or bottom up. I always say the best model is to meet somewhere at the middle. Because the top, they know exactly what they want. They can develop the policy and the strategy. But they don't know exactly what is going at the bottom. But at the bottom, and I will tailor that into the construction, demolition, waste, and emit. At the bottom, then they don't know exactly what they want. And therefore, they have to meet somewhere at the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly at the middle, but somewhere in between. Now, to do that, before drafting a policy paper or a strategy or whatever, you have to have physically a pilot project to see the pros and cons of such technologies. And based on that, you can draft your policy paper, you can draft your strategy. There is too many strategies without implementations. My talk today is mainly to convert what is already declared in COP26 as a net zero initiative into action plan. If there is no action plan, forget it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. So what I've understood from you that convincing higher level management of the country to have a political will should start by giving them a live example on ground. So
political will is a very important.
So that's the middle way. Let's say that this is the middle way we can meet them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. so much.
I'm Habiba Ali, Masters of Mechanical Engineering student. Thank you, Dr. Salah, for your lovely presentation. My question is, you mentioned that in Egypt, we currently have 4 green building rating systems. And I'm wondering what stands in the way of effective application of green buildings around the country here. I'm currently working on developing for my thesis, Advanced Energy Design Guides for Buildings in Egypt. And part of that is looking into what we already have and what is that lacking in order for it to be widely implemented.
I think I may paraphrase your question. Why I do a green building? What is the benefits behind doing a green building? All my parents and friends, they do just the traditional buildings. Then why I'm just, putting a lot of pressure on myself and convert my building to be green? Right. There is no such awareness within our community in the MENA region, not only in Egypt, in the MENA region. And therefore, there is no incentives to encourage the people to go or to move into green buildings. That's one. 2, there is also another rumor says, and the green building is expensive and it costs a lot of money. Not only that, but also they delay the construction and it affects the time schedule. And therefore the developer, they always reluctant to move into, and he doesn't have the knowledge of the green buildings. Then awareness, that's very important. Incentives from the government. Awareness of what? In a green building is not expensive. Does not delay the time schedule of the construction phase. Now, in the United States, even they started in 1998. Right now, there is around 2 million buildings green. In UK, which is the first country worldwide that started the rating systems, green, they have only 600,000 buildings green. Both has a good awareness program, but the American, they have another business arm where they try to promote this kind of green buildings all over the country, plus the government. The government, they have some kind of a degree just a few years ago to have all federal buildings to be LEED silver minimum. And therefore, I think it is, that's what, if you remember just one of the slides, I say cooperation with the stakeholders is a must. And that is, by the way, it's Sustainable Development Goal number 17, partnership. Partnership among what? Among the government, private sector, national organization, international organization, and the most important stakeholder, people.
Would you say that based on our current position that achieving net zero buildings to again widely implement that in Egypt, would you say that is too ambitious or it's doable? Would you say that based on our current position that widely implementation of net zero buildings in Egypt, would you say it's too ambitious or it's doable?
Let me just give you a quick idea about net zero buildings. When we try to incorporate the concept of net zero into our building, we try to make it cost effective. And therefore, we never touch net zero energy because it requires PV cells, and this is expensive. The return of the PV cells is almost about 7 years. But therefore, we try to focus mainly on net zero waste and net zero water, because this is very expensive to very cheap to implement, and the return of the savings is huge. Now, we have also another problem in Middle East countries. The developer is completely independent from the facility manager. Then the developer, they always sell. And he doesn't care about the operational cost, the maintenance. Then the facility manager is the one who will take care of that. Then the savings will go into the facility managers, not to the developer. But if you try to aware the people, this is a marketing tool to sell your products. One thing very important, which I did not mention that in the presentation, green building is not only saving water, energy, and materials and greenhouse gases, but it will improve the indoor environmental quality and outdoor environmental quality, which is directly related to the health and well-being, Sustainable Development Goal number 3. And therefore, that's what I mean by awareness. We have to aware the people about the benefits, the tangible benefits and the intangible benefits. And the intangible benefit is more important than the intangible benefit because it is related to health.
Thank you so much for that. I have one last question. Would you elaborate more on the use of microalgae in buildings?
Yes, unfortunately, we have only one building in Germany, started in 2013 and finished in 2015. You can get it on the internet, but they never released any data after that. I don't know why. Even I contacted a lot of people. I never get any, because the idea here, now you have the microalgae will go through the windows, will allow the natural light to get into the building. And then the microalgae require what? Require solar energy and air and carbon dioxide to grow. Now they collected the microalgae at the bottom to produce a biofuel. And then they use the biofuel to generate electricity to run the buildings. Now, this is the missing data, which is not available until today. I don't know why. But I feel, and this is very promising. Microalgae, as I mentioned in one of the slides, it is the green gold. Why it's green gold? This is the future. One article, I read it almost about more than 10 years ago when we moved to the new campus in 2009, is to have some kind of a self-independent community to produce all your crops, all your food, all your resources, including produce your own fuel. Your own fuel to drive your car within your community without any need for any external resources. I remember this was a theoretical analysis, it was a theoretical article, but again, it can be doable.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are. Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, just going on what she was saying. Yeah, there are, especially in the UK, there are a lot of leaning towards self-sufficient communities now, which is a trial that a lot of sustainability experts are trying to do. So hopefully that flourishes.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. And thank you all for attending. And see you inshallah soon.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. Thank you.